So we're going to run through a review fairly quickly because, of course, the slides are piling up because we're on our third set out of 3 workshops. So for some of you, this will be review. For some of you, it'll be really, really fast going through some of the concepts. My name's Kirby McInnes. I'm with the Permaculture Research Institute of Saskatchewan, doing the web stuff for them. Shawn, sitting here, Shawn and I are going to be doing the presentations together. I'm going to run through review and then a little bit more about water, specifically with respect to like urban yards and that kind of thing, a little bit about soil, and then I'll pass over to Shawn, who will talk about design, and he'll talk about some of the aspects of some of the things I'll go through for concepts. He'll show you some of the work that he's been doing with the design. I'm not sure which it's for, which design you're showing. Mishmash of ones? Yeah. Okay. So he'll show you some of the design work he's been doing on a couple of different projects around here. Okay, so permaculture. There's the long definition of it. The elevator definition: a design system for sustainable human habitat. Sustainable means it produces enough energy to keep itself going. Permaculture is what we call an ethical system. We have guidelines for the people who are involved in it, the things we should do. We have the prime directive. Prime directive. Okay. Take responsibility for existence and that of our children, for your own house in order to feed ourselves. The idea behind this is get ourselves on stable ground so we can help others. It's not a survivalist, every man for himself kind of thing. It's a little different. The perspective of it is get yourself going and then you can help others. Code of ethics as well: care of earth, care of people, return of surplus. Some other concepts. Responsibility. The concept of responsibility with respect to permaculture, it's not that whole sort of biblical sense of man shall have dominion over all the plants and animals or whatever it is. It's more about our role is to be a guiding hand in returning responsibility to natural systems instead of trying to micromanage and control them, because they know how to take care of themselves. There's also the concept of the right livelihood, in that take what you need to live and then return the surplus. And then I like that all things have an intrinsic worth. The linear model versus an ecosystem model. The thing on the left there, that's the world we live in. Right? We take and we use energy, and our source of energy in the world is the sun, of course. And we suck raw materials out of the earth, and we produce stuff that we consume that goes into a waste stream. And despite our best efforts and the things we try to do to convince ourselves that it doesn't stay there forever, for the most part it goes there and stays there forever. Whereas on the other side, you look, that's a much more complex model, and that's actually super, super simplified when it comes right down to it. But you can see that relationships go all around through that model. It's not a one-way trip. So we're trying to move toward the model on the right. Here's another version of it, the trophic pyramid. The idea behind this is it takes 10,000 kilograms of primary production, some kind of plant material, because those are the things in the world that actually can turn the sun's energy into something that animal life can use to sustain itself. So 10,000 kilograms of something like that will produce 1,000 kilograms at the next level up, 100, 10, 1, so you lose an order of magnitude every time. So the argument is that, well, if it effectively takes 10,000 kilograms of primary production to sustain a kilogram of humans. And so if we just ate further down the food chain and went and just ate all of that stuff, we'd eliminate all of this and we'd save so much energy and all of that kind of stuff. And that's true if you think about it totally in a linear sense. And with our modern factory farming type of food system, it's a lot more true than it should be. Because realistically, there are all kinds of relationships in the natural world going all sorts of different ways. And when these animals die, they're returning stuff back into the world and that kind of stuff. And it's not so simple as that. We can't eat the same stuff that a grasshopper can turn into food, or a cow can turn into food for that matter. We wouldn't get much in the way of nutrition from it. So part of, when you're thinking about yield, it's not just what can be produced for you to consume, it's what is there to keep everything going overall for the long term. Entropy. Energy is a constant in the universe. Entropy is increasing. Entropy is energy that gets into a form that's locked up so that we can't really easily get to it. I should have looked up where that law came from. This is the third time I've done this. Energy not put into use in the system results in chaos. Pollution, basically, is energy that's coming from the system that can't be put into use in the system. So it becomes waste, and you get smog, acid rain, that kind of stuff as a result. So what we're trying to do as permaculture designers is design a system so that it will use energy that can be absorbed in all ways in the system so that it's not producing this excess energy. So in natural systems, everything's connected. So the systems are supported by multiple elements, so functions of the system. So I'm trying to think of an example now. I don't remember what I used last week. Last time we did this for this example. There are many different types of animals, bacteria, and that will help break down food, waste, that sort of thing, and turn it into compost. It's not just, there's not just like one type of worm or that kind of thing. Thinking about it the other way as well, elements perform multiple functions. So if you have a chicken, you can take a chicken out, put it out into areas of your yard site. Chickens will eat things like types of grubs and bugs and that could turn into pests and actually destroy your garden. Chickens also, you get them out once your garden's established so that they, say parts of an orchard or something are established so that the chickens themselves can't damage it. They're scratchers as they're moving around doing their business, so they will help keep weeds down as well if you have them out there regularly. So they're performing multiple functions. And once again, the concept of sustainability. When you're designing, this is the order you need to think in. Water first, right? Because water is life. Really, water is the most important thing. Access. So how do you get to the elements that you need? And Shawn's going to show some of that a little bit later on. And then third is your structures, the buildings, the things that you need. In terms of order of investment, so the things that you want to invest in first, you want things that produce a yield. Remember, that's more than just a crop. Things that produce a yield, and I'll show an example in a sec. Then things that save you energy, and then lastly, things that use energy. So when we're talking about water, and we've got a nice little valley here. Those are contour lines. Everyone familiar with contour lines? What they look like, what they mean on maps? Anyone who's not? Yeah, okay. Yes, I know you do. So what this shows is a valley, right? Water coming down various ways in the valley. So when you think about order of investment, we said things that produce a yield, which is they will store energy. So water likes to flow downhill, right? As our instructor, when we took the PDC, the Permaculture Design Certificate, this past summer, his name was Jesse Lemieux, and he was a great instructor, and he's coming back this summer to do it again. He likes to say water seeks its own level. Water likes to be flat, right? So if it's uphill, it will go downhill until it can basically expend its energy, reach a point where it's level. So when you're thinking about order of investment, things that produce a yield, so store energy in some way. If you can store your water higher up the hill here, you're effectively storing energy. Because then if you need to put that water to use further downhill for irrigation, for drinking, for recreation, for whatever purpose you want, it's a lot easier to do because the energy that's stored, you can use that energy to get it to where you need it further downhill. Whereas if you store the majority of it downhill, you've got to then pump energy into it to get it up the hill to places where you might need it. Does that make sense to everyone? So when you're thinking about order of investment, there's energy even embodied in water and where you store it. Okay, I'm going to skip this because I know Shawn's got his slides talking about access. So, methodology of design. Am I going way too fast? Anyone have? If you have any questions, please just put up your hand and ask. Okay. Techniques. Techniques are how we do things. Right? Strategies would be when do you do something. And design is looking at patterns. So you would look at something, see a pattern, say, oh, I recognize that. So when I hit that situation, these are the techniques I should use to implement. That's breaking it down functionally and thinking about the steps and the way you would break things up. So what our goal is to create a system that will take care of itself over the long term with a minimal amount of our investment, at least over the long term. There's a fair bit of investment early on, of course, to get everything in place. Observation is, of course, key to all of this because you have to be able to observe, pick up the signs to be able to do the designs that will work with the environment you're in because it's going to be different. Climates are different, landscape is different, right? The type of land, the soil's different, the weather conditions. So you need to learn how to examine some of these things. Maps and contour lines, that's very important, especially when we're talking about water because water goes where the hills are or goes away from where the hills are. Elements of the system. So we can go and look at things and say, look at a particular aspect of something when we're designing and say, well, what does it need within the system? And what will it produce for us within the system? And we can do that for a whole bunch of our core elements and go line them up and say, well, this particular element produces this stuff. This particular element needs this stuff. So we can figure out a way to get them working together, and that's a good thing. And I'm kicking myself because I deleted the little thing about the chicken that I had last week as I was crunching down slides because, of course, I'm adding more slides every time as we have more stuff on the end. I should have kept it in. Weather, I just mentioned weather, right? Weather patterns are different everywhere. Climate conditions, right? Dry, wet, tropical, cold climate, that sort of thing. And depending on where you are, you need to know about how they work. Soil conditions, they vary greatly. So while you're observing, this is fairly, these are the steps to take to kind of just lay it all out. I think lots of people would look at this and go, well, of course, that's what you would do. This is along the lines of scientific reasoning when scientists create a hypothesis. And they observe. Presumably, they do some observation first. Right? Then they create a hypothesis. Then they do more testing to try to support or disprove the hypothesis. If the testing they do shows that their hypothesis isn't right, then they will go back and revise it. hopefully, right, that's the catch. You have to be willing to admit that maybe what you were speculating here about what it might mean isn't quite right as you start putting it in a test and see that things don't work. So, nope, maybe I was wrong. So let's go back to the drawing board and do some more observing and say, well, what does it really mean? Is there anybody in the hardcore sciences, like anything where they do that kind of stuff? Or logic? Logic's another area where... Is there a department of logic here on campus? I don't even know. It's in philosophy? Okay.
No, but they would teach philosophy.
Ah, okay. Another concept is time stacking. Nature doesn't like a vacuum. Nature will fill a vacuum as quickly as it possibly can. Right? If you leave a field alone, it'll be full of whatever will colonize it. Dandelions usually first, right? But then other things will come along. So what we want to do is we want to fill that vacuum. And we want to fill it with a plan for the long term. So the example here, this is a plan for nitrogen fixers, because they're required to help keep the soil in balance, to get nitrogen into the soil. There are certain types of plants, legume type plants, that will fix nitrogen into the soil. So what we want to do is fill our vacuum here. We've got, say, we're at the start of a design and we're re-landscaping, for lack of a better word, an area. And so we want to plan for this. So what we're going to do is in our first year, we'll fill the thing up. Our plan for the first year, not in our first year, our plan for the first year, we will fill the thing up with something like field peat, an annual thing. And large amounts of this too, per acre, 100,000 seeds per acre kind of thing. We'll just be out there, Johnny apple seed, right? Johnny field pea seed. Shrubs as well. So we'll start planting shrubs as well. Because shrubs aren't annuals. They'll grow, they'll mature over a certain point in time. We'll also plan for some larger shrubs and work our way up to, this is one of the largest legumes that there are, it's Russian olive, which will grow and mature to be a very, very big tree. But what we're going to do is we're going to do this all at the same time. This is why we call it time stacking, because we're throwing everything in place to get to the point where we've got stuff that's going to be there for the long term. But we have to fill that vacuum. So right off the bat, we want to get things growing that will stop the things that we don't want to be there, which is what a weed basically is, right? It's a plant that's growing where you don't want it to be. Does this make sense to everyone?
What's your numbers, like the 1, 5, 10, what exactly is that, like shrubs? Years actually. That's in okay,
about how long it is before these are mature.
Okay.
One interesting thing I learned anyhow, maybe other people knew it on the PDC last year that Jesse was talking about, was that if left alone, ecosystems will evolve to a forest. That's the natural state of being. And I know we think, well, but what about the prairie, right? Because it's just prairie wildgrass. Well, there's actually archaeological evidence that the native population did a lot of slashing and burning and stuff to keep the prairie there, because their primary food source was the bison. And the bison preferred grass over things like willows and aspens and that kind of stuff. So even our prairie would be evolving toward forests if it had been left completely to its own devices. So this is what we are doing here, is we are mimicking a natural system. We're trying to get it to evolve to a mature forest, and there are 7 layers. We're not going to get into that level of detail in what we're doing in these series of workshops, but there are layers to the forest and everything. And so what we're doing is we want to get it to that point, but we want to stop. We want it to go the way we want it to go. So we are filling up the void with the things that we want to be there, but mimicking the way it would happen if it was left on its own. Speed keeping things longer. So.
Yeah, because these are the plants you suggested, just examples, right? Of any tree, could be an apple tree, for example, for the Russian. I mean, there's nothing specific about those, are there?
Well,
I know that field peas are nitrogen fixers.
These all are, actually, because they're all in the legume family. So the plan is to get them there so you're not planting, not necessarily having to plant field peas year after year after year. You may have to for the first few years. So separately, you're not going to necessarily fill everything just with this, because you want things that will produce food, because I don't know about anyone else in the room, but I'm not keen on eating Russian olives. Not much to them. Even carragana. Supposedly chickens love it, but not high on my list. So we would put other things in there as well, but we want the nitrogen fixers to be in there because of the fact that they help with the soil. So this is only one aspect of the whole picture, but it's just to illustrate the way you do it in terms of time stacking. You've got some stuff about zones, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so the concept of zones, very quickly, is that you see the house in the middle. The farther away you get from your house, the zones, the less management you will be doing of things. That's the concept of zones. So zone 5 would be your unmanaged area, where it's left to its own devices. Moving in toward closer to the house, which would be zone 1, which would be like your annual vegetable garden and that kind of stuff, because that takes basically daily tending. So it's not going to be nice concentric circles the way it's shown here. That's just illustrated, but that's what zones are about. Sectors are just a different way of looking at things. And I know Shawn's got a couple of slides about this as well, thinking about the slope of the land and what it might mean. This is what we're trying to do, right? Is channel energies into or away from. So when you're thinking about sector planning, you may think about here, especially where we live, the north wind sector, because in winter that's a very big thing. So you think about when you're situating your house and that, and you go, well, this is where the wind's going to be coming from in the middle of winter, so we want to plant a windbreak of some sort to help protect against that. Some other basics. So everything's of use. We can't order complex functions. We can't tell the various bacteria, worms, all the other things involved in creating compost how to do it. All we can do is make use of that function that they do for us at the end. And the third one, which I think is probably most important, is that we only know so much. We know from observation, and we like often to think we know more than we do, but we don't. The story I like to tell about this is from reading, I think it's called the David Suzuki Reader is what it is. I had this, it's actually in one of the libraries here on campus.